Hi, welcome to this special episode of the OrgDev podcast. So this year has been a big one for us. So we wanted to share some of the incredible insights, tactics, and experiences our outstanding guests have shared with us over the past 12 months. This year, we recorded 44 episodes, and the podcast has reached listeners in 109 countries. Our guests have also joined us from across the world, from California to Australia, as well as Spain, Austria, the Netherlands, and Sweden, to name a few. And together we covered a broad spectrum of OD practice, from neuroscience and psychological safety to systems thinking, agility, self-organising teams, imposter syndrome, and organisation design, to name a few. What we've pulled together here are two videos which are both curated sets of highlights from these conversations. Each video is divided into 4 chapters. Feel free to dip in where your interest takes you, or just watch it end to end. Looking ahead to next year, it's already shaping up to be just as strong. We've already got conversations lined up with leading practitioners, academics and authors, including Dave Snowden, Gervase Bushe and Rupert Morrison, and we're really looking forward to sharing their insights with you. The mission from Danny and me is very simple. We want to bring together first-class OD practice into one place that is all in the service of transforming organisations, teams and individual performance. And we also want to inspire the next generation of organisation development and design practitioners. It's basically the podcast that we would have dreamed out when we started many years ago. Most importantly, we want to say thank you to you, the listeners. So whether you're watching this on YouTube or listening on audio, your interests, your comments, your subscriptions generally make a difference. The more of you who subscribe and share the podcast, the easier it is for us to attract guests of the highest caliber and keep pushing the conversation forward. So please, if you haven't, subscribe to the channel and be part of something special that we're building together. So wherever you're watching this, thank you so much for being part of the community and enjoy the highlights.
And the inflection point, you said it, Garen, very nicely, is HR is not about HR. It's about winning in the marketplace. Because if we don't succeed in the marketplace, there's going to be no workplace. And so we're seeing an evolution that's a pretty dramatic one, that when I in HR go into a meeting, I don't start by talking about my HR program, hybrid work, leadership, culture, compensation. I start by talking about, what do our customers need? What do our investors need? And as Stevie said so well, what do our quality of life with families? So for me, an inflection point is HR is not about HR. It's more about building success in the marketplace. And that's different. And you can answer that. You will never need to do a podcast again. I mean, it's one of the challenges.
I think it's something really interesting what you said also about the fact that the chief people officer in that scenario, the pressure he was feeling, the culture for the organisation's culture. And so often we'll talk to HR professionals who feel like the culture sits with them, which is flawed in my view. It's not the responsibility of the HR team, even if it's called the people and culture team.
That's a function of the weaponized ignorance in my mind, though, because if I am the CEO of an organization, then I have the most visible profile and I have huge amounts of pressure. You know, I'm the face of the company. And if I say, we're committed to this, we're committed to creating a culture where people can perform at their best because we know how vital that is for our performance as an organization, but then turns around and says, okay, HR, it's over to you. I just said that on national television. Go. And they separate themselves from driving that, then it has a limited chance of success. It's not that it can't succeed, but one of the things that, I've learned so many important things from John Amaechi, but one of them was, if you have people in the most senior positions in an organization who are willing to hand off responsibility for driving organizational culture to somebody else, then that sends a massive dog whistle that who we say we are here does not align with the lived experience that we actually want people to have. And the moment you have that disconnect between who we say we are here and how people actually experience the business, that is the thing that leads to all the stuff that we heard about, the Great Resignation, which is more accurately described as the Great Rejection. The number of people who will come into an organization and not stay through their probation period because they're like, well, this is not the picture that was created for me when I interviewed. churn, and it's a mistake for people to think that the only ones who are leaving organizations are younger people or more junior people or low performers. They're not. There's incredibly capable, talented, high potential individuals who are looking at to find a place that aligns with their personal values and doesn't expect them to just turn into an automaton and have no feelings and no empathy, and that's the pathway to burnout.
And if you enter that atmosphere or that climate and you go, well, how do you feel? They were like, well, who are you and why are you wasting my time? So rather, what I've been doing is more like trying to simulate that and be part of the debate and being a bit more, well, you're about to make a massive mistake. Have you thought about that? That doesn't sound like, that's not a neutral coaching question, is it? That's more like, testing the waters, really sort of engaging with the leaders because they want that. And everyone's mileage will, vary here. So this is not to be taken as universal advice, but this is a coaching stance that I've not seen that much explored, certainly not in literature, but what I've seen work rather well. Yeah, so go to war a bit with them and, enjoy that.
Yeah, there's a natural kind of style that you often see at senior team level, which is more drawn to that kind of debate style. And you kind of articulate it really clear, which is like there is that kind of not necessarily win-lose, but if I'm going to change my mind, then you have to really get into my point and you've got to kind of convince me because my mind is pretty much made up already. It's like, how do you do that in the most expedient and efficient way? When you don't have a vast amount of time with them, you don't have, I'm assuming, like 2-hour coaching sessions with them. It's kind of short, sharp sessions.
How do I do that? Yeah, that's the magic, isn't it? I think what I tend to do is to do the classic things like let's investigate. Are we using that word in the same way? It's a classic one. What assumptions are hidden beneath this? Have you... risk is always a good one. Have you considered the risks? And usually we find ourselves in discussions that are more temporal, like when do we do this? And then I become the one who talks about the cost of not deciding, and what does standing still look like for you? And I guess I'm just trying to muddy the waters for them a bit, which sounds very counterintuitive. But usually what executives also do is that they come in with a solution. And the way my engagement with leaders have developed is that I reduce as much clarity as possible around that solution because they think they have that clarity, right? So what I do is I muddy the waters a lot and I ask a lot of difficult questions. And, it's a bit like the double diamond of design thinking. So you open up and then you have to close in. So at the end of a coaching session, I try to clear the waters again. But now the waters are even more clear.
And when you talked about, there's one particular example that's quite disturbing, which is about Wells Fargo, where it's actually, unethical behavior on an industrial scale, like 100,000 employees, 3.5 million false bank accounts opened. It just shows, doesn't it, the scale. Was that one of the examples that surprised you the most?
I wouldn't say it surprised me. None of these things surprised me because the more you read on scandals, the less you're surprised. But what it does is it gives me the best example for the argument that scandals are not about some bad people at the top of the company, as they are presented in documentaries on Netflix. 100,000 salespeople committing fraud. You cannot explain this by calculus, unless you have an HR department that is specialized in hiring only crooks, which I don't think is the case. Or people who are crooks think, well, I have to work at Wells Fargo because that's where I can live my fullest life as a crook. No, that is not what drives it. What drives it is situations that are so desperate, there's so much pressure, that one of my favorite quotes from a salesperson at Wells Fargo, so much pressure that one of them later on, I have been in the Gulf War. So he was a veteran soldier, and Wells Fargo was worse than the Gulf War. So imagine that. We have people who say, well, I couldn't sleep on Sunday, or couldn't sleep at night by thinking about the next day's shift, or I was hiding in the men's bathroom crying, or someone says, I was achieving my goals, but then they were never satisfied. I have to do more and more and more. So you're always running behind your goals. You get humiliated by your superior. You are fired if you don't achieve your goal. They yell at you. So it's a horrible, horrible situation. You do what it takes to survive. And then you observe your colleagues doing it. And they get promoted, and their behavior get tolerated. Their leaders push them to do it. And then you think, yeah, well, if they all can do that, why not?
So I guess that I've got loads of different things I could talk to you about here, I guess. The first one I would say is to learn more about what it is. So really understand what psychological safety is before you start doing anything about it, and commit to it personally. So on a practical day-to-day level, I would suggest starting with doing some inner work for yourself. So work through pillar 1, which is self, focuses on self-awareness, authentic self, that kind of stuff. If you want some ideas for that, there's loads of good stuff in the book. I talk through pillar 1 in a lot of detail, loads of activities in there for you to work through. So if that's something you want to work on, I'm going to signpost you to the book. Get everyone involved. So start the conversation about bringing your authentic self to work. I always encounter this resistance for people to do this in the workplace. They don't want to have that conversation in teams. So we're usually brought in to facilitate that conversation. So we get people in a room and we start talking about who do you think you are? How do you think you show up at work? Those kind of things. What's the difference between your authentic self and your identity? Those kind of questions are really important for people to start thinking about personally. And then we start thinking about what's affecting your performance and behavior at work, those kind of things. We get people to do that on their own. Then we bring people together and they realize that actually they've got similar lists. It's quite revelationary for a lot of people. So yeah, that work on bringing your authentic self to work and having that conversation is really important.
And you talk in the book about psychological courage. So that kind of idea of taking actions despite the imposter feeling, so not using them as a reason not to do something. Can you just explain a little bit more about that?
And I'm glad you asked that one, Danny, because psychological courage is a concept that was new to me. But the psychological courage, when I found the research on that, I thought was really interesting, in that it's the courage to challenge your inner psyche. So it's the courage to challenge the view of yourself. But I looked at the courage to update and accept the view of yourself to one more positive psychology, taking the view of courage as being courageous enough to accept the positive feedback on the inside, and then to update the view of yourself to one that is more positive, because actually the external view can be more accurate than your own internal subjective view.
And there's an element of not waiting for the feelings to pass. You're going to sit there and these feelings will go away and then I'll go and do the thing, or then I'll take the promotion, or then I'll stand on stage. It's not that, is it? It's kind of doing it anyway.
It's got to be courage that actually helps you step out and do something, to speak up, to put yourself forward for promotion, to do that presentation. You know, some of it is courage, and then confidence grows from the experience going well, and you can say, yes, I can do it again. I think that's slightly different from overcoming imposter feelings, because you overcome the imposter feelings by internalizing the success afterwards, by changing that view that you have of yourself, because the imposter feelings is the I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy of that promotion. And it's changing that inner mindset, which is where the psychological courage happens. And thinking about this word of not knowing, the word that popped into my mind was being okay with uncertainty and accepting that you won't have all of the answers. And I think there's also something about being okay with saying, I don't know, or being okay with saying something if the situation transpires that it doesn't go the way you think. And when you feel the pushback, it's really uncomfortable to stop and go, okay, I sense in the room that something isn't working, or I sense that, you know, the change that we're trying to make here isn't landing with you. You know, tell me more about what's happening. I think we need courage to do that too. That's not necessarily linking to the courage that reframe it as from the imposter feelings inside our heads. But I do think there is an enormous amount of courage to stop and listen and understand what's happening.
One of the things that really stood out for me is you were quoting a senior leader in an insurance company, and they said, and that's something you sort of hung on to, is the quality of the interior condition of the OD consultant will make a difference in the quality of the impact they make.
And one day he just said, one of the things he noticed, that the success of the project they were working on didn't depend so much on the degree the person had, the experience they had, but the interior condition of the consultant. Very important, because in terms of presence, in terms of doing the work effectively, we must do a lot of inner work. at one point I tell people when I'm training these doctoral students, you need to feel like you have a right to be there doing the work that you're doing that day. So, sometimes we feel almost apologetic, we want to fit in, and that gets in the way. But so people who do the inner work. So in terms of my inner work, besides learning and starting with NTO T groups, learning a lot about myself in that T group, I learned particularly that I didn't think I should be angry. So I think to be an effective person, it helps you to step outside of the science. So now we're into the art. This is the art of becoming the whole person who can, who can do the work effectively.
Emotions are kind of, oh, we don't do that. It's not for the workplace. We don't deal with emotions, but they're there, aren't they? Just
they are
unacknowledged.
Yeah. We want to just put them aside. People get angry or people get frustrated or someone gets excited and everyone's like, why are you excited about this? That's a fad, right? But, excitement is saying, I'm interested, right? I'm optimistic. I want to engage in this. Anger and frustration, well, maybe we haven't found the root cause yet. And if we just say, hey, I'm hearing this anger, that's what it sounds like to me. Someone might sit back and go, well, I'm actually not angry. I'm just really passionate about this. Here's what's been nagging me, right? And you might actually get some more information if you just put a name to it and let someone then further articulate what they're thinking.
That's really interesting, isn't it? Because I think in my experience anyway, so at senior leadership level, a lot of senior leaders suppress their emotions. They may be feeling very emotional, so they may be feeling very anxious, and you can tell the behavioural tells, but they wouldn't necessarily name it. For practitioners watching this, how do you create the psychological safety where they feel okay to actually name their emotion? Because although it's perfectly healthy, they may feel making themselves a little bit vulnerable in front of their colleagues, for example, rather than sort of projecting this, I'm in control, this is all fine.
Yeah, well, if you're in control and it's all fine, why are you anxious, right?
That's a good question.
I think that's where practitioners who have some experience with coaching, it benefits them. I found that over the years that the training I continue to engage in executive coaching helps me navigate those situations, because you have to meet the executive where they are. But two, sometimes your job is to help name things as a practitioner. So if you're sensing that from a senior leader and you're in a room of senior leaders, there's nothing wrong with as who you are in your role saying, hey, I'm sensing a shift in the room. I'm feeling a tension. Is anyone else feeling that tension? And just you being the one to say, this is what I'm feeling. Are you feeling it? And making it safe to just, this exists. And then they can all correct me if I'm wrong. Say, nah, we're fine. Okay. But you have to keep creating those moments where it's okay to surface it. And sometimes the group you're working with will acknowledge it, and sometimes they won't. And if they won't, it's probably just a sign they're not ready. But you just keep gently nudging it over time. And again, that's where org development's not an event, it's a process, because that process can take, several iterations before folks are comfortable.
Yeah, and you touch on something, because that's that kind of the thing that you get with experience, isn't it? It's I'm going to make a very light intervention. You can act on this or not, but you don't have to respond perfectly to me now. You don't have to go, I'm having a cathartic moment because you asked the right question at the right time. You kind of sort of making and if they decide to act on it, that's okay. We'll move on. We'll try again in a different way. There's that kind of not feeling the need to be certain and be right at all times.
It's uncomfortable. It really is. Because, here's another difference with org development, a practitioner in it versus a consultant, right? Consultants are called in to be an expert. They're called in to say, here's recommendations on how you solve your problems based on what we know. And if in my perception as what an org development practitioner is doing, you're not there to solve the problem. That has to emerge from the group that you're working with. Your job is to help facilitate the space and the conversations and the process to actually get to that result with the group who needs to own the result. So putting yourself in the position of saying, I'm not here to solve this for you, but I am here to create that safe space and give you the opportunity to do it in a way that maybe you haven't tried before. That's uncomfortable. That's, I think, when we talk about the difference between an accidental and intentional practitioner, when you're an intentional practitioner, that's going to feel much more natural than it does early in your career. Because I have to admit, that's probably one of the things that in the last 8 years, it's taken me a while to be okay with saying, I don't have the answer. What are we doing here? What do you want to talk about, group? It's your conversation. It's your agenda. I set up an agenda with you, but if that gets blown out of the water because this topic is the topic to talk about, are you willing and able to stay there? And is that what you want? And if the answer is yes to all those things, then okay, let's stay here. Let's have this conversation because it clearly matters to you.
So one thing to talk about there is leadership development, which is a multi-billion pound industry globally. And the results are at best inconsistent and at worst patchy. What is like your approach to leadership development, and what might organisations be getting wrong about that approach?
I think when we think about making interventions in organisations to enable positive change, to get to a place where there's more of what we want to have happening and less of what we don't, to paraphrase Dave Snowden, who's real influence amongst others. But I mean, you could take it back to kind of Mary Parker Follett's work over 100 years ago, talking about how we could recognize how interrelated, how relational, and how entangled we humans and also the material nature of our organizations are. I think one of the things that we need to think about is when we think about making interventions in organizations is what organizations are. And I am liking thinking about them as social and material entangled constellations that are always in a kind of process flow, which is part of what I'm working through with my PhD research. I want to take that further, actually, to think about the kinds of things we do in organizational development that would make sense if that's how we thought we were. So what maybe doesn't make sense is to say that we can make change by just taking individuals, if we see ourselves as being less individual as we'd like to think, taking individuals, creating a behavioral framework, and, if you like, training the individuals to behave properly. Now, there are some real issues with that run all the way back through the kind of history of organizational development and the social science of it, which could be challenged and critiqued to be more about controlling the labor market than actually enabling and emancipating it. But just on a kind of fundamental, will this make the change? I mean, I started really thinking about this at Roffey Park. Roffey Park is a beautiful place, great tradition. People would come, we would do lovely work. They'd say, this is amazing. And then, come back and say, actually, what's really difficult is actually making any of this have any difference when I'm in the workplace or connecting to it. So when I talk about organization as assemblage, the idea is that we're all parts of something rather than what I am is inside me. It's actually we're part of something that's entangled and connected. So you can understand why a person at Roffey Park in this beautiful scenery, eating wonderful food with good facilitation and so on, might be like, I am really aware of how I can behave in this kind of ethical, thoughtful, reflective, leaderful way. But go back into a context that's completely different and something completely different happens. So I think we need to think more broadly about what organization is and think about the context from which behavior emerges. It's great to have aspiration to move towards, but we must recognize, I was looking at a previous podcast, so why do good people do bad things? We will fall down if we think that it's enough just to have a set of standards and then train people to deliver those standards. And it also creates some real problems with how people feel when they fail. And that's another interest of mine, is how actually fragile the capability of humans generally, me certainly, and leaders to not know and to be in a place of not knowing, to be able to cope with failing, which actually is a necessary constituent of any learning process, which I think is the heart of development.
What I'm interested in is the human being and the flourishing of the human being individually and in groups. And it just so happens that work is a good place to do that kind of work because we spend so much of our time there. And also all of us as human beings, without sounding too kind of Adlerian here, all of us are hardwired to contribute. That is fundamentally, I believe, what we're on the earth to do. I found a fascinating thing out last year, which is, how the retirement age was originally calculated? This blew my mind. You may know this, but this blew my mind. The retirement age is calculated by, in the first instance, the mean average age of the human male upon death minus 1 year. So basically it was, You finish work, you've got a year to put your affairs in order, and then tatty bye, right? That was literally how retirement kind of came about. And what I took from that is, oh my God, it's as human beings, we have to have use. We have to have a means of contribution, right? And if you come back to what work is a means of us expressing our desire and our will to contribute.
You're touching on something which is just so fascinating, which is because what is our role? People want to invite us into the role of judge, or they plonk us right in the middle, and that's not necessarily where we're most useful.
Right.
And we have to listen to ourselves. Then we go, well, this doesn't feel right. Am I in the right place? Am I going to take your invitation to be in the middle and try and sort this out? How do you know when you're not in the right place and you need to maybe step aside, or there's something wrong about the process?
Yeah. I think in this case, there wasn't something wrong with the process, because the thing is you put the process in place, you put the governance in place. And for me, I have a very clear visual of what that looks like. In this case, I can tell you, we had our core project team, which was like doing the work. It was me and a couple of really fantastic right hands, basically like putting this process in place, doing the workshops, doing the facilitation. We had identified subject matter experts that would be brought into the conversation as needed, attending I think that they were weekly core team meetings. Then we had our steering committee, where we identified these are our real decision makers, and here's the executive sponsor who can kind of trump everybody else. That's how we did it. And I knew that my job was never as a decision maker. My job was to put a really clear and concise process in place with core milestones that we're all working toward together, and celebrating the success when we've achieved them, moving on to the next thing, bing, bang, boom. But what I'll say is, because these conversations are so intense and so just like loaded and personal for people, I got caught up in the drama of it. And that's really easy to do. And imagine having these conversations without the process in place, without the governance in place. And that's often what people are doing. It makes perfect sense why you avoid this like the plague. This comes up a lot when you think about performance management. Like, managers can't give tough feedback, and they sort of just give them the pay bump or the next level up just to, do it. It's the same sort of thing. Without the infrastructure and the education on how to have these conversations and recognize what your place is in the process, you can get turned around. So for me, my role is never as decision maker. It's always as facilitator and expert. And my job is to tee up the really sticky wicket questions and usually say, here's option A, B, maybe sometimes it's C if it's really sticky. This is what I recommend. And I leave it to them. And I tell my teams, because they can get frustrated because they want to be more powerful. And I'm like, no, this is actually quite powerful. You can really set the stage, you can build the world for them, and you can put forward your recommendation. You're not the first one through the wall. That's a blessing. You're there as an advisor, right? And you really make that clear, because you also need the leaders to take ownership of this. It's not for you to be the scapegoat, which I think, by the way, also was happening when I was leading out these conversations in that forum. It's really easy to blame the consultant, to blame the external person coming in. And so being really clear, this is my role, and this project sponsor is your role.
I did a very interesting experiment. I've actually experimented a bit with a big audience and asked them if they would prefer decisions in terms of resourcing, meaning if you were to undertake a new project or a new opportunity, and this decision was made by your manager, a physical person, or if this decision was made by AI, which one you would actually prefer more and you would find more just. Interestingly enough, but that was during the early times of AI, people still preferred the resourcing decisions to be made by their manager. They preferred the human task allocation compared to AI-driven task allocation. And I think that this says a lot about our perceptions and the unconscious biases as well, to move back into the unconscious bias topic now, because AI is still something new. For many people, it might be a black box that we can't really understand. We can't comprehend how it works. And sometimes we might think that it has all of the right solutions and the right decisions for us. Some other times we might think, oh, yeah, but what if AI is wrong? You can see that ChatGPT can give you still wrong results. It can provide you with wrong inputs. What can we do during that situation? And it's interesting because another researcher, Margaret Mitchell, that I follow, and she's very passionate about AI and unconscious biases. She has done a big research on that topic, and essentially, where the outcome of that research is that we need to trust algorithms. We still need to trust AI and everything. However, what we need to question is what kind of data are we feeding the AI? Because you need to imagine that AI still is a baby, right? It's behaving like you are behaving. So if you're feeding the AI incorrect kind of data, if you're feeding AI incorrect, if you're making wrong calculations in the algorithm, it is still going to produce wrong assumptions, wrong decisions, and from some experiments, it has been identified that there are still unconscious biases in the AI within algorithms. And I think that the one that has stuck with me, and it's an example I'm sharing with everyone. Someone actually asked AI, I can't remember if it was ChatGPT or if it was another model, but asked an AI model. It asked a couple of questions about two kids, a boy and a girl. And it started asking more questions and challenging the AI about some classes that they enjoy at school. And the boy enjoyed, let's say, maths and wanted to become a doctor. And then the girl enjoyed more literature and wanted to become a teacher. And this is clearly biased because of the data that has been fed into the algorithm, the AI. And the AI clearly took the most popular opinion or what it identified in that data and produced those, let's say, those outcomes. So we still have to take everything with a, we have to challenge everything that AI says, but at the same time, we need to actively train them to become better and remove those unconscious biases.
What are some of those myths that exist out there that are just sort of seen as common practice, or that's just the way things are, that the organizations or OD people or HR people might just be getting wrong?
One of the things that I do encounter when I go to conferences is that people say, I'm a really good organization. 100% of my workforce has gone through unconscious bias training. I have to pause and go, I know you mean well, but we've studied the literature for a long, long time, and there is empirical evidence, strong empirical evidence, that unconscious bias training has no effect. Unconscious bias training cannot exist in isolation. It must be part of a whole culture shift within the organization, with behaviors modeled and carrot and stick put in place consistently. So if you think that you can just put everybody through unconscious bias training, you tick that box, and everybody is going to be fine, one, you're deluding yourself, and two, you're doing a disservice to your workforce, because their work life is not going to get better.
How does it come to the point where that lives and people investing so much and they feel that it's done? Where does it break down, do you feel? Because at the core of it was an initial good thought, wasn't there? But it hasn't worked necessarily.
The thing is, I don't think it's not that it hasn't worked, but it doesn't work in isolation. And organizations, when they approach something like discrimination with a tick box of mentality, you find that nothing changes, right? And you're surprised that nothing changes. And I'm going, why would you be surprised? If your board is entirely male and your C-suite are all middle-aged men, and you're telling the rest of the organization that you're an equal opportunities organization, right? And that everybody, including the CEO, has gone through unconscious bias training. And I'm going, that's not enough. It was never ever going to be enough. And I think even people who design unconscious training packages see this as part of a journey of change. But most organizations have seen this as the be-all and end-all of their obligation.
What's particularly interesting you in the field at the moment?
So in the field of neuroscience and science of the brain and body, I'm just really interested in the work that's going on that is beginning to show us far better how, it's obvious your brain and body are connected, but there's some really interesting stuff going on that really show, how our microbiome, what we eat, that microbiome within us, how that really impacts on our thinking, on our behaviors, even on our behaviors. So I think that's fascinating. So it's that kind of holistic thing. And read a book fairly recently, The Extended Mind, The Power of Thinking Outside the Brain, which I just really loved because it's really talking about, our brains are they're not just a thing that lives in a bottle. They're a thing that lives in a physical entity that lives in a world that is a physical entity, and it's about how all that impacts on us and changes how we behave and what we do. And I just think that's very, very engaging.